Hi, this is the first in a mini series of videos focusing on smaller, easy to achieve projects to encourage you back into your workshop and get fabricating again. It might seem a little overcomplicated to begin with, but I can assure you it's not. One simple angle cut, some straight cuts, bit of bevel work with a router, a few dowels, and you're there. So I'm starting with some rough sawn oak and the most rudimentary of design drawings I've come up with yet. Hopefully the camera's picking this up, ceiling cam 1. But if not, I'll photograph it, pop it up on the screen for you. So I know the length of the base shelf I want to be 900, and I'm thinking the mid shelf at 6 and the top shelf at 300. I've been looking at some designs of Japanese architecture online, and it's kind of inspired in the loosest possible sense of the word by those. Everything else, measurement wise, is subject to alterations as I go through the process. I'm thinking the bottom shelf 20mm, the middle shelf 15mm, the top shelf 10mm, and the supports will match the shelf underneath. So the supports of the middle shelf will be 20mm to match the bottom shelf, if you follow. So in order to work out how much timber I need, I've got to work out the width of the piece that I've got. This is about 143mm, so 140mm time I clean up the edges. And it's currently 38mm, so probably 35 by the time I clean it down. And if I want a 20mm finish, I better cut 22 to give myself some scope for glue up misgivings, so on and so forth, planing down and finishing, and a 3mm kerf. So I'm going to lose 25mm as I come across the piece. So I'm going to get 5 pieces times 35, 3 5s 15 plus 5, 25. So I'll end up with 175mm. So that's cool because I want my shelf depth to be 150mm. So if I take one piece, I'll cut 950, so I've got room at the ends to trim back in case I get any tear out. And then I want 2 300mm pieces for the bottom supports. So I'm going to cut 400 because I've got a splay on the bottom, which will take up a little bit more. So next I want a 600mm piece, and again 300mm, cut 4, and my top piece is 300mm long, and I've got a 400mm piece left. Beautiful, so I can get it all out of one piece. And I'm going to cut them down into their sizes now so that they're shorter pieces, which means hopefully I'll lose less thickness when I plane it and subsequently thickness it. So I'm going to use the Festool jigsaw to cut them up. If I do it on the chop saw and it moves, it will jam the blade, and that really freaks me out. As I've been granted full creative license with this project, or rather, I haven't decided which way to do it yet, I'm just going to cut the pieces down for the bottom shelf and the first supports, which was 25, or rather 25 with the blade curve. Spot of glue then. Definitely cracking on with this one. The road to completion is a short one this time. Well, it needs to be, doesn't it? If this is going to take part in the wonderful new playlist, Easy Weekend Projects. That just rolls off the tongue. Work along with Graham. So my first 3 boards are out the clamps. Glue's dry. I'm going to get them planed and I'll see you back at a tick. So next job, cut this piece to length on the chop saw and then cut the bevels on this piece, these pieces on the table saw. I'm going to go with approximately a 30-degree angle on them so they lean in at about there-ish, but the angle's not that important. It's the feel of the thing, the mood. So I've got my blade preset to 30 degrees. I've got my piece in my Incra sled and fence, and I'm going to use the Incra stop. After I've cut the first cut, I'll set the width that I want so that I can make sure both pieces are exactly the same size. Does that make any sense at all? And here's the mock-up. Looking good, I like it. So next job, slice down the timber for the middle shelf at 15mm. So my bottom shelf's already cut to length, 900mm. I now need to rip it down to 150mm, and then I'll put the bevel on. Once the bevel's on, I'll be able to calculate exactly how far back I want the middle shelf supports to be, because I don't know yet. Is that bad, or is that just creative license? I like that. So I've just got a 45-degree bearing guided bit in my palm router. I'll do the front first so that I can minimise any chance of tear out when I come down these sides. With my bottom shelf now cut to width and my bevel running around, I can now calculate the size that I want my supports to be for the second shelf. And I was originally thinking I might need to come back 10mm, but now I can see it. 10mm looks a bit too big. So I'm going to set it 5mm back from the bevel, which is going to give me 140mm for the supports. So now bevel's on the front. Starting to come together nicely. So I just need to make sure the front is flush. I really like that look. That's great. So I can now put the bevel on the end of the middle shelf and cut that to width. Starting to get really precariously balanced here now. See, you can never have too many clamps. You just can't. I think that's too long. What do you think? So that's the oak cut to 300mm. Feels too long, doesn't it? Here's a piece of ply, slightly thicker, I know. Cut to 200mm, and that just instantly feels better. Well, here's the finished design. I'm El Chuffdo. I think reducing the top down has really given it that sort of Japanese-esque feel. Oh, go on, give me a bit of license here. Yep, happy with that. So now it's time for the joinery. And guess what I'm going to choose? The domino. Not again, I hear you say. Absolutely, I say. I retaliate with. Purely and simply because it's going to make what could be a difficult job dead simple. And I believe the key is the center line. So when those incredibly clever people at Festool designed this little puppy, and this is the DF 500, the only one I've got, they thought about the fact that as a carpenter joiner, we need a reference face to work off. And they've given us loads, but in particular, this line here, on both sides, is the exact center of the bit. And that is 10mm from the base. So, on my pieces, I need to cut a domino into this piece, which I can do referencing that center line and setting this to the appropriate angle. And then I need to cut mid-board, which again is dead straightforward, knowing that that base is 10mm from the center line. I've really got to strike a line back, give myself a reference fence to work from, and plunge, and job should be a bobby. Let's find out. So I've marked 2 points on my base shelf, both 160mm in from the edge, and that's exactly where I want the center point of my bottom support to be. So I'm going to square that line back across the top of the board and then set a line 10mm back from there. So that's where I'll be able to place a piece as my fence to rest the base of the domino up to while I plunge cut these two mortises. The only other thing I've got to take account for is the fact that the back of the support is flush with the back of the bottom shelf, but the front of the support isn't. So on the back, I can use the lug that sticks out at the bottom of the domino, but at the front, I'm going to have to mark my line and use the center hairline cursor on the domino to place it. Do you know, I think that made sense. So the lug at the back allows me to place the mortise at 37mm in. So if I do the same on this side, so with my 4 mortises cut in my base shelf, I can now cut the mortises in the bottoms of the support. And to do that, if you remember, I referenced off this back edge with the lug that's on the bottom of the domino, so I can do the same on the base, and I'm going to transfer that center mark for the mortise on the base shelf onto the bottom of the support. Now I'm just going to strike a center line, set my angle, and setting the angle is simplicity itself. And we're good to go. So let's try them for size. That one's split. Don't you just love it when a plan comes together? Look at that. Beautiful. Arguably a far more critical placement, as there's no lateral movement in the domino slots whatsoever. But I don't have dominoes small enough to go that way, so we're just going to have to get it right. And once again, I'll equal up the shelf left to right, mark the centres, and do exactly the same as I did with the bottom. Wish me luck. Mark centre. So if I mark centre. I'm going to do the top of the support legs first, as the angle's already set on the domino. And with this side I can reference off both the front and the back, because the support and the middle shelf are exactly the same size. So the theory's sound, lines up okay, and we already know it looks good. So I'll crack on with the top bit. I'll see you back here in a tick. Grab a coffee. So I pointed out earlier that this little ridge here on the domino marks center line of the bit, but I failed to mention how I'm marking center line on the piece. I'm just using my marking gauge, a possibly forgotten tool in the arsenal. So with my center line now scribed, it is merely a case of, he says, getting that point on the center line. Hopefully that's in shot. The first cut was about 0.5 mil high, so I dropped it down just a shade. And now we're good, so I'm going to cut my piece. And there she is. That's the dry fit. Bit fiddly getting it together. So I've got a bit of sanding to do, and I'm sure you've got better things to do than to watch that. So I'll get the sanding done and I'll get us all prepped for the glue up, and then the end post will be inside. So I'm all sanded, smooth as a parson's nose, and it's time for the glue up. And the glue up I'm going to do in 2 parts. I'll do the bottom section, so the supports and the mid shelf, let that dry, and then I can glue the top section to it, so the bottom will be nice and stable and supportive. That's the theory anyway. Answers on a postcard, P.O. Box, Alaska, if you have a different opinion. And here she is out the clamps in all her beauty. I think it looks superb. Simplicity itself, a few angle cuts, a couple of dowels and some glue, a few bevels and just reducing thickness, and yeah, I'm chuffed. I feel ultra creative. So the finish. What else would be appropriate, in my opinion, but a spot of Danish oil? If you remember the bourbon cabinets, link, the Danish oil made the grain absolutely pop and come alive. And this is not for the same batch, but European oak, the same as the bourbon cabinets were. So without further ado, get my wad out. And here's the finished article. Elegantly simple, I think, would be an appropriate term. Well, at first glance, it can look like it's a complicated project, but as you've seen, it really isn't. I probably made it look more complicated than it needs to be, really. One simple angle cut, the rest are straight cuts, and a bit of bevel work with a router and a few dowels. And that really is it. I think this is a perfect project to encourage you back into the workshop again. I hope you agree. Anyway, thanks very much for watching and see you next time. Ta-ra.